welcome to Teaching Natural. My name's Dare. I am going into my 5th year as a high school English teacher, 3rd year AVID teacher in SoCal or Southern California. And this video is about why I almost quit teaching in 2022, why I'm coming back, and what I'm going to do differently this school year than what I did in 21 to the 22 school year. So let's get started. Okay, so this year there were a lot of larger systemic problems, and then there were a lot of things that were kind of specific to my school, and then there were a lot of things specific to myself that bubbled up this school year that really made me think it was going to be my last school year. I'd say one of the biggest things that weighed heavily on me personally, and it probably did weigh quite heavy on other teachers, is that it felt like teachers were public enemy number one this year. Between having to constantly enforce masks and being yelled at and berated by teachers, parents and guardians, other students about enforcing the mask mandate, that was just awful. And in California, we didn't lift the mask mandate until March 12th. So from August to March 12th, I was constantly having to say, put your mask on, put your mask on, put your mask on. Wearing it like this, that's not having your mask on. This, not having your mask on. This is what having your mask on means. And then, at my school, we had students cutting holes in their mask and then putting the mask on so that their whole, everything was exposed. And, that was their form of protest. And as a teacher, I'm like, what do I do? Like, it's not my personal, policy. I'm just trying to do what my job has told me I have to do to keep everyone safe. And, getting that pushback from everybody in the world about just the worst thing you could possibly do in a pandemic is to wear a mask. That was hard. And then curriculum choices, or in some states, curriculum specifies that you need to talk about the diversity of people in the world and in your classroom. And that came under fire this year a lot. Not so much now, like it's kind of, people have decided it's not a hot button topic anymore yet until we go back to school. But so many people had so much to say about the curriculum that teachers were teaching to make sure that students understood history, or they understood that people in the world just exist differently than others, and that understanding those people and having those people understand you. How do you have conversations with people who you agree with, people who you don't agree with, and yet still treat them as civil human beings and have them treat you as civil human beings? Trying to do that became such a hot button issue by people who have never actually gone through a credential program and never spent a day teaching children and seeing the results of what happens if you don't teach children that people are different, and yet that difference is not an excuse to treat them inhumanely or for them to treat you inhumanely. That came under fire this year a lot. Another thing we had to combat that was more systemic was student apathy. There were so many students who just did not care this year. Students who would not even attempt to do the work, wouldn't attempt to come to tutoring, wouldn't attempt to just try. And as a teacher, how do we work with that? Another bigger thing was that a lot of times we'd only hear from parents or guardians when they wanted to complain about something. And when I say complain, I say raise an issue angrily and not have a solution, or not have an end goal that we could work towards. And another thing that almost made me quit on that, parents and guardians decided they were going to speak to teachers however they wanted to speak to teachers. I talked to so many people, and I experienced it myself, where we really were parents and guardians as punching bags this year, where they just decided that we weren't human beings and this wasn't a professional setting and we didn't need to be spoken to as experts in our field. We could be talked to like we were someone's personal servant because they paid their taxes. Like it just was awful, and students were speaking the same way too, taking influence from what they saw from their parents and guardians, but also what they saw from the way other people in the world talked to teachers. That was awful for me, and I think it was awful for a lot of other people too. So those were kind of the bigger systemic things. Narrowing it down to my school district. In my school district, there was a lack of discipline. And even I'll say, like, narrowing that down to my school, there's a lack of policies, a lack of accountability. The dress code policy did not exist in my school. An attendance policy, a tardy policy didn't exist. These were things, behavior didn't exist. Like, there were no policies. It was the wild, wild west at my school. And so that was something that was incredibly hard for me personally to try to hold students to a standard and yet not have backup from administrators, school board, parents and guardians. Like that, all of that made it incredibly hard this school year. So another thing that is kind of specific to my school is we tried something new called Grading for Equity. And some of it was great. The idea of grading standards, not grading for things like participation or, bringing in tissue boxes, but really looking at, are students meeting the standard? Are they not meeting the standard, but they're close? Are they exceeding the standard? Are they mastering the standard? That was phenomenal. Love it. Gonna continue to do it. But what we took from the book, Grading for Equity, and I don't remember the researcher's name, we tried to allow resubmissions on assignments. And even with some parameters set, it did not work very well on my school schedule. And I will get to that a little bit more. But I had 200 students this school year. And every time I had gotten something graded, and I was like, whew, I can relax on my prep, I would get resubmissions for an assignment we had had a time ago, and I'd have to grade those resubmissions. And by the time I got grading the resubmissions, then the next assignment they were turning in that was working on the current standard, or we were re-hitting the standard that they were doing the resubmission on, I'd have to grade that assignment. And by the time I got done grading that assignment, another round of resubmissions would come in. And so I felt so much pressure on me because I was constantly grading. And I made a rule that I was not going to take grading home. So I was using my prep period and any space I had in class periods when I was not teaching, I was grading. And because I was grading like that, that meant that planning and contacting parents and creating whatever I needed for my curriculum for the week, I had to do that on Sundays and on my own personal time. And so that made it feel like I never stopped working and I was exhausted. And so the idea of allowing resubmissions was great in theory, in the way that the teacher practiced it with, block schedule, that you had 2 hours with the students and you only had, 25 students. Like in that theory, great. But in actual practice, when you have 5 classes of, 36 students or more or less 200 students, allowing them to constantly resubmit, and then the changes weren't really substantial changes that showed exceeding standards or mastery. Like it really didn't move them enough for the amount of energy I was putting into grading. And one thing I'm just kind of having to come to terms with now that I'm going into my 5th year of teaching is that grading as an English teacher is just going to take hours. It really is, because we don't have the luxury of just always giving a multiple choice exam and allowing the computer to grade it for us. Are there some things that we can do that way? Absolutely. But writing and grading critical thinking takes time to give really good feedback, because we're not giving feedback that's like, need to have a comma here, need to have a period here, because that doesn't teach students anything. You're identifying the problems and they're writing for them. But we're trying to ask questions about how can you vary this sentence structure to show mastery of complex or compound sentences or compound complex sentences. How can you show higher academic vocabulary here instead of using this same word? How can you expand this idea to feed back to whatever this idea before was? Or how can you introduce sentences or introduce quotations in a different way than you have done previously to show your skill? Those type of critical thinking questions from teachers to give feedback, they take time. And there are some that you can say like, oh, I have my little key and I just copy and I paste, things like that. But every student's writing is different and every student's issue is different. So it always constantly takes a teacher to be thinking. And that's great. But it takes hours. It takes so much time. And maybe I'm just really slow at this and I'll get faster at it as I go on. But the amount of time I was spending grading and trying to give really critical feedback, oftentimes for some students, not even to look at it, that was something that was exhausting, and that was adding to why I didn't think I was going to come back for the 22-23 school year. A thing that's kind of personal to me is that for the first time ever, I am teaching on a traditional schedule. So I have 5 classes that are 54 minutes, and we had about 36 students in each class. I have never taught on a traditional schedule, and I never went to school on a traditional schedule. So that schedule was very, very new to me. Oh, and we also had the same students year round, even though like grading periods were in semesters, but the students stayed with me the whole year. I have never taught that way before. I have always taught on a 4x4 block schedule. And so that would mean that we had 3 classes that we were teaching. The students had 4 classes. We'd have the students for 90 minutes, and then we had them for 6 weeks at a time. We would get we had them for 9 weeks at a time, get a new rotation of students the next 9 weeks. The following 9 weeks, which would be after winter break, we would get our first group of students back, and then they'd go away. We'd get our second group of students back 9 weeks. That's how I've always taught. That might sound chaotic to other people, but since it's the way I went to high school and it was the way I had always taught, that was what was normal to me. And so having 90 minutes, there were a lot of things I could do and I could give students time on. Having 54 minutes, by the time you just do the agenda, it feels like 10% of your class time is already gone. Like, then you have the pack-up time at the end of the class. So it's like, okay, that's another, 2-3 minutes gone. And then if your students don't transition quickly, that eats up a lot of time. And so I did not know how to take everything I was used to doing or the best teaching practice and condense that to 54 minutes. It was very hard for me. And then to teach 5 classes a day, that was very hard for me. And then to have the same students for an entire year, that was tiring. Because if you had a tough personality, you didn't get a break from them. And so the schedule was just something that was added on top of the things that I was already experiencing this school year. I had some dealings with parents or guardians. I had some parents or guardians who were upset that I was not answering emails off of my contract hours and that I was not working over certain breaks, like I wouldn't work over spring break. And I had parents and guardians who had problems with that. And I realize now that I was having an anxiety attack, but sometimes I would get some of these emails and I would just feel like I was shaking. Like I could not even respond to the email. I had to just go walk or, teach my students or do something else because I physically was not feeling well. I didn't realize until I watched Honest Teacher Vibes Why She Quit video that I was having anxiety attacks and panic attacks about this parent is upset about this thing, or I can't contact this parent or guardian. Like I'm trying to tell them that we need to have a meeting about their student, or I'm trying to tell them how their student's doing and they're not contacting me back. I was worrying myself to sleep. Like my body physically could not handle all of the things that I have been talking about compounded on each other. My body couldn't handle it. And so I talked to my therapist about it and she's like, you're having panic attacks. You are having some high anxiety. And my therapist told me that she knew I personally did not want to go on medication, but she's like, we've got to work together to figure out some way that you don't take all of this onto yourself. And I'll talk about how I'm going to work on that when we get to the things that are going to change. But another thing that was compounded onto why I thought this year was going to be my last year was the sub shortage. I think I took 2 days of my paid leave off. That was in October. And then in March, I had 2 days off, but that was because I had to go to jury duty. So it really was not days off. It was jury duty. And that's it. Those are the only days that I took off. And when I thought about, you know what, I'm not feeling too hot, or I could really use a breather, or I could really use a day that I could just, get my grading done and not have to worry about teaching, the first thought would be, but then I have to write sub plans. And I really don't want to document every single thing that I do for this substitute for my class to run smoothly. So it'll just be easier if I just go in and I just do it. I was also thinking, well, we have a sub shortage. So even if I put in for a day that I need, I'm not guaranteed to get it because there are no substitutes, or I'm going to have to make my secretary pull some other teacher from their planning time so that they can cover my class. And I don't want to make my secretary have to do that. I don't want to have to take time from another teacher. Plus, I was getting calls to sub for other teachers, which takes away my prep time. And that was just one thing that was just piling up this year, just piling up. The last thing, and this is unfortunately something that is back in the news, was the safety and security on my campus. I love my campus. I love my school. But there are some times where I have not felt safe because we don't have enough campus security. We have a campus security shortage, and my school is large. I think there were 2,100 students this year, and we only had 4 campus security officers. I think we got 1 more during the course of the year. So just 5 campus security to handle 2,100 students. It was not enough. We had no way to contact them because the only way we could contact them was to call the office. But they wouldn't always answer because, of course, they're not in the office. They're out patrolling the campus. And, the school secretaries didn't always have time to answer the phone. So if something went down in your classroom, it was you. And hopefully the teacher next door would hear something and come back around. But, or if you had a student who was just wandering off because they were supposed to be going to the bathroom and they're, texting their friends to meet up so they can vape or whatever, or just to get out of class, you couldn't send campus security to go find that student. Or by the time you could contact someone to go find the student was already walking back in after being gone for 20 minutes. And then my campus itself is not gated, so anyone can just walk onto campus. And a lot of teachers brought up this concern that like an angry parent could just walk right into our classrooms and there's no way to funnel them. And that makes me nervous, especially about what happened with Texas. I didn't feel safe on my campus, and that was something that was worrying on my head about how do I protect my students? How do I protect myself on a campus that isn't helping me protect them? So that was another big thing. So all of these reasons that I've been giving you are why I thought this year was going to be my last year, why I was ready to quit in March and somehow got my groove back. So now you're probably asking, girl, you've just laid out all these reasons about why you wanted to quit. Why are you coming back to this profession? I've got 3. Number 1, the reason why I became a teacher. I became a teacher because I wanted every single student to see a part of them in their classroom. In the text that we read, in the discussions we have, I wanted students to feel seen, and I wanted to give them a way to see others. And I know that if I leave the classroom, that's one more teacher who's not doing that work. So I'm staying because I want my students in such a pivotal time. This is why I chose high school, to see these ideas of themselves and of others and to learn how to dialogue with themselves and with others. That's the biggest reason why I'm staying. Reason number 2 for myself. I made a commitment that I was going to finish 5 years. If you're not a teacher, 5 years is kind of the marker for teacher retention. The statistics were 2/3 of teachers were quitting by their 5th year, but I think this year and last year with the thing that we all went through, that probably exacerbated that statistic exponentially. So many teachers do not put in the same amount of years in the profession as they spent studying for the profession itself. And that is just crazy. In California, you have to get your bachelor's degree and then you have your teaching credential, or you can do your alternative route, but that's still an extra year on top of your bachelor's degree. So it took me 5 years to become a prelim teacher, and then you have to go through 2 years of induction to have your clear credential to be like a fully credentialed teacher. And so if I quit before the 5th year mark, the thought of all of the time and all of the money that I have spent into becoming a teacher, for that not to be equaled by actually being a teacher, it don't sit well in my soul. It does not sit well in my soul. And then the last reason why I'm staying is because I want to see if the profession gets better. I want to see if these 2 years were completely an outlier, or if this profession really is just weeding all of us who are trying real hard out. I want to see if it gets better. So those are the 3 key reasons why I'm staying. And right now, those 3 reasons are outweighing all the reasons I had to leave. For now. So what's next for next year? I'm going to change my classroom, some of the things I do to give students more agency and more accountability. I already have some policies, but I'm really going to take a look at some of the things I do in my classroom and see where can I take so much of the burden off of me. So like things about, peer grading or peer reviewing, certain policies about how I do things in my classroom. I want to give more student agency so that I do not feel like I have to do so much. I want to become more of a facilitator in my classroom than the, authoritarian figure that everything runs through. And I think if I do that, my sub plans will also get easier because I won't have to write so much of the stuff that my sub has to do. And thereby that makes it easier on me when I feel like I need a break. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put some of the things that I think are common sense, I'm going to put them in writing for students. With the pandemic setting them back emotionally and with their organizational skills, there are a lot of things that I, as a type A person, know to do that I had to realize students don't know to do them, and now they're even further behind on knowing how to do them. And while my brain says they should know how to do it, the reality is they don't. So how are you going to teach them to do it? So I am doing a lot of introspection of, okay, when I don't understand something, what are the steps I go through? When I come into the room and I see something on the agenda, what do I know to pull out? When I go to my staff meetings, what do I know are some of the rules or some of the just common courtesy things that are not spoken out loud because they expect you to know how to do these things? What are the things we do? And I'm putting them in writing, and we are going to practice those procedures for like the first 2 weeks for sure, hitting them hard and then coming back to them over and over again. And I think by putting some of those in writing, I will not get so frustrated, and students themselves will not get so frustrated, because I can say, okay, pull out this worksheet or this bookmark or this checklist. Which of these have you done? Where are you at? Okay, do these and then call me when you are at this step. Or, teaching them how to ask more specific questions than just like, I don't get it, or I don't know, or can you re-explain it? So I'm going to change some of the things I do in my classroom so that I'm giving my students more control and more vocabulary to advocate for themselves. And hopefully I won't have to repeat the same things over and over and over again. The next thing I'm doing is professional development. By this time, my professional development series intro video will have come out, so you can see the books that I'm going to read to develop myself better. I've identified some of the skills that either I needed to get better at them before the pandemic, or the pandemic has exacerbated the issue, and now I need to go back and to really up my knowledge and my policies and my procedures and my practices to work on those. One of the biggest things I'm going to do for this coming school year, 22 to 23, is I am taking my personal days. In California, and I'll talk about compensation, but in California, we keep our personal days. They roll with us. And then if we go to a different school district, our sick days come with us. So I have a good 4 years worth of sick days saved up, because I really only use 1 or 2 days. And then the rest of the days that I'm out, it's like jury duty, or it's something that is covered by whatever the thing that was coming on. And at first I was like, oh, I'm going to save these days. And then when it's time for me to retire at 62, I can go out a year early. I can go out at 61 and just be vacationing. Boo-boo. How I felt this year, we ain't gonna make it to 61. We ain't gonna make it if I continue to do the same things this year for the rest of that 30-something year career. Oh my gosh, it scares me when I say 30-something, because I literally have not even been alive long enough to think that, oh, my career will be that long. Like, it's longer than I've been alive at this current point. So I am taking my days. no, I'm not going to use every single day because, again, I do want to save that out to be able to cash out for retirement. But I am going to strategically plan now the days I need to be gone. We know the month of October and the month of March, we take in vacation days. We're taking mental health days. We're taking grading days because I cannot work myself the way I worked myself this year. I can't do it. It was not healthy for my body. It was not healthy for my mind. And if I'm not a healthy person, how the heck am I going to be healthy for my students? And how am I going to teach my students that it's okay to take mental health days if I myself am not taking days? So I'm going to be using those. And then lastly, I need to identify what better looks like, because if one of the reasons I'm saying is because I want to see if it gets better, well, I need to see what better looks like. I need to have a set goal for that standard that we're working to. And so that's going to be looking at my mental health. What does better look like for that? The policies and procedures at my school. What does better look like? Because it's not going to suddenly be perfect. After a whole year of not having a dress code policy, we're not suddenly going to just come down with the law. Same thing with behavior policies and attendance and tardies. I'm going to identify what looks better because it's not going to be a perfect ideal, right off the bat. I also need to identify what better with school security looks like, because that is an area that made me nervous this school year. So I'm coming back. I am not leaving the classroom, but I want to leave you with, if you feel like you have to go, please don't think this video is demonizing you for not being willing to stick it out or suck it up. No, because I was right there with you. If you had asked me to do this video in the month of March, I would have been like, why I quit. Me and honest teacher vibes. Same thing. And there are tons of videos on YouTube about why people are quitting, and we're saying a lot of the same things. I'm choosing to stick it out for this year. And next year, who knows? Maybe I might say, you know what? It is just too much. And next year, I might say I am recommitting to this year. But I wanted to say, like, if you are someone who needs to leave the teaching profession, you're not quitting. You are not letting down your students. You are doing what is best for yourself. And if you are coming back, we're going to get through this. We're excited. It's the fun part of the school year where it's like classroom setup and back to school night. Like that fun stuff is coming. It's our time to rejuvenate for the summer. And we're going to document this journey together. So, in the meantime and in between time, please take care of yourself. And I'll see you in the next episode. Bye.